And Riley is my partner. He's under the table right now. We'll bring him up in a little bit. So yeah, that's about me.
And how did you come to be partnered with Riley?
Riley and I came to be partnered in 2009. At the time, the Search Dog Foundation were utilizing the Sundowner Kennels in Gilroy. I went up and was being partnered with one of two dogs that they had in training at that point. And
hold on, you're saying we're not ready to officially begin. Good practice.
That's good.
I think we are live though, so just be
ready. Okay. That's okay.
I'm so glad it's you.
Yeah. Okay.
Do you want to see it go?
Mm-hmm. Riley, here. Get up. Get up. Sit. Boy.
Is he in the shot? Okay.
Oh yeah, he's
okay.
Full shot.
Oh, great. So he says we're ready to go. So why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and introduce Mr. Riley here.
My name is Eric Gray. I am a firefighter paramedic with the Santa Barbara County Fire Department. I've been on for about 11 years. I'm currently stationed at Station 11 in Goleta, which is just outside of UCSB. And this is my partner Riley. He and I have been together since 2009. He and I were partnered in Gilroy at the training location the Search Dog Foundation used a number of years back, Sundowner Kennels. I went up and there were two dogs at the time who were potential candidates. We didn't know who we were getting. Riley and I initially weren't paired together to train with each other. I was given a dog named Rex, who is currently in Long Beach, and the first few hours went okay with Rex, and then we did a few healing exercises where I ended up stepping on his foot, and then I also made a correction with the leash, which he yelped, and it really kind of ruined my confidence. I thought I'd hurt the dog. The next day I was given the leash to Riley, and the rest is history. He and I were really meant to be together, and it's been a great partnership since.
And how did you transition from being a firefighter to hearing about and working with the Search Dog Foundation to be partnered with Riley?
When I was in the academy, one of the instructors, Howard Orr, who was one of the original Search Dog Foundation handlers, he had a dog named Duke. When I was going through the academy, he was teaching a large portion of the USAR components, and he mentioned that he had a search dog. And at the time, I was aware of USAR. I was not aware of the usage of canines in that setting. Howard and Duke had deployed to a number of occasions, the most notable being 9/11. So he gave us the presentation on the 9/11 deployment, and then he took us all outside and showed us what Duke could do, and it blew my mind. I didn't know dogs could do what he did. I couldn't figure out how he had done it, but I was hooked. I was absolutely hooked. The athleticism of the dogs, the drive of the dogs, the fact that I already thought I had the coolest job on earth, and now I was going to have the coolest job on earth, and maybe someday I was going to have a dog that was connected to it. So a number of years after, Duke was about to retire, and the chief at the time wanted another handler in the department. He approached Howard, and Howard said, "I'm going to retire Duke, but I've got a guy." And so that's how I got put into the process to get a search dog, and that's how he and I eventually got paired.
Now, what exactly do you and Riley do? What are the special things? What are Riley's superpowers?
Riley's superpowers. Riley has a very unique job. He thinks it's hide and seek, but what in fact he's doing is looking for the presence of live human scent. He's not a victim locator, he's a scent locator. So what he helps a USAR team do is facilitate speeding up the process of clearing multiple locations, buildings, whether it be after an earthquake, tsunamis, hurricanes. He has the opportunity to move much more quickly than any of the technology we have to help us locate and get people out as soon as possible. So he uses his nose. He thinks it's hide and seek. When he locates the live human scent, he will bark, at which time he gets his toy, which you can see today is still very, very important to him. And so that's what Riley does. He's a major tool in the USAR community to help speed up the recovery of people who are lost.
I think he knows you're talking about him.
He's clearly he's good.
So tell us a little bit about Riley's beginnings, what you know of his life before USAR and the Search Dog Foundation.
Riley came to the Search Dog Foundation almost by accident. The family who I'm still in touch with, Riley was born to a breeder in the Bay Area. He was purchased by an elderly couple who, as the story is told, their medical conditions deteriorated. He was given to a purebred rescue facility where he was quickly picked up by a family with two small boys, which made sense. Two small boys, they've got a yellow lab. At the time, his name was Mojo. And Mojo and Riley have, he's not lost it, have an incredibly high toy drive. The small children that were running around with toys became targets, not the children, but the toys, and so the small children were becoming casualties of his drive. The family took him to get him obedience training, and it happened to be at Sundowner Kennels where they train the search dogs. In a short period of time, the trainers at the time realized that he had a great deal of potential, called the family and asked, is it possible that you would consider giving him to us and we will give him a job? And at the time, for whatever reason, they agreed to it, which was wonderful. They worked with Riley for a number of months, and he quickly found that his drive for toys was equally met with his physical abilities to do the job. And so they trained him, and it was nice. We were able to, after I was paired with Riley, the family came back to the training center at the time with the two small children, and were able to see that Mojo, who is now Riley, was a much more well-behaved animal, but he also had a whole lot of interesting skills, and that he was going to have a job that was really going to be something they could be proud of.
Now, a lot of Riley's teammates were actually shelter dogs that have been turned in probably for the same reason. They were too energetic for home life. Right. Tell us a little bit about the Search Dog Foundation and how they find dogs that are in shelters.
Sure.
The majority of them, I believe, are.
You're right. The Search Dog Foundation is an incredibly unique, probably one-of-a-kind foundation. Their motto is turning rescued dogs into rescuers. So a little bit of history on Search Dog Foundation. Wilma Melville, who was the founder of this organization, was a teacher who trained her own dog and to do live scent disaster search. She responded with her dog to the Oklahoma City bombing, which obviously we're familiar with, a devastating event in our history. Among the many things she took from that experience, she realized that there was a huge, huge deficit in the ability to get dogs that are qualified and the number of dogs into the disaster search matrix. She was about ready to retire from being a teacher, and she came back with a mission to try to figure out how we could how quickly they could bring more qualified dogs into the disaster search setting. She tied in with Klaus Davern at Sundowner Kennels, who was a professional trainer, and said, what do you think about this? And a lot of these dogs are handed off into shelters because they fail the pet test. They're not bad dogs. They just need a whole lot of structure, and they need a lot of management. And that was the fastest way to find qualified dogs without having to raise them from puppies to become search dogs. So that's, in a nutshell, how the Search Dog Foundation was founded, and how the majority of the dogs that they provide to firefighters around the United States come about. They're shelter dogs.
And one of our followers, one of your followers, asked the question, at what age do the trained dogs start their service, and how many years do they usually serve?
As I understand, they try to get the dogs to be under 2 years of age. They are one is ideal because it takes usually a year to train them. Once they are certified, the dogs in the FEMA search matrix, they're certified for 3 years at a time. So once they're certified, they're cleared to respond to any number of disasters for 3 years, at which time they recertify. So Riley is 8 years old. He's going to be coming on to his third certification here in the next few months. And then after that, he will retire happily as a pet.
And what types of breeds and characteristics are they looking for?
The vetted breeds that are in this industry are the ones that are known to be the working dogs, the German Shepherds, the Golden Retrievers, the Labradors, Malinois, Border Collies, dogs that are known to be highly intelligent, don't mind being independent. Our dogs need to work independent of us, trainable, smart, durable, enjoy what they do. We never force these dogs to do what they don't. Watching these dogs for as long as I have, you just see this immense joy. I just came from a training this morning in Santa Barbara, and 2 veteran dogs, and you would have thought it was their first day. So it's a 3-year process, or a 3-year certification, and then they can work through that 3 years.
And how, in general terms, how are the dogs trained to search for survivors? How do you get them to the point where you and Riley are to be deployed?
So it's a process. They find dogs that they feel have the general characteristics of toy drive. They do a number of evaluations to make sure that it's just not a visual drive. It's a nose drive. Lots of people have dogs and think, oh, my dog likes toys, and he should be a search dog. Well, then let's do a quick evaluation, and we throw the toy and he goes and gets it. Throws the toy and goes and gets it. Then we throw the toy in a bush and we spin the dog around, and the dog doesn't know particularly what to do. And so yes, the dog does have a great deal of interest in toys, he just doesn't use his nose. And so what happens is, the very early steps of these dogs' training is they transfer the drive for a toy to a human scent. So there's what we call an alert tube, and trainers will take the toy and run away and give him the tube, and the dog obviously will follow, and then very quickly they are enticed to bark, and that starts to shape the very, very basic beginnings of realizing that if I run out, I use my nose, I bark, the toy shows up, and it just becomes a very easy cyclical process. The dog thinks it's hide and go seek, every day is fun. And so while it's incredibly serious work on our part, and when we get called to these events, there's a very, very serious work to do. We have to really maintain the reality that this is a game to these dogs. And we keep things as fun as possible. We'll re-energize them in between searches to make sure that they're still energized and interested. So that's how they do it. It's really just taking their drive for a toy, connecting it to a human scent, encouraging them to bark to let us know that that's where they are, and it's hide and seek.
And then you transfer that skill over to a large rubble pile, which then eventually in the real world under deployment, you'll transfer over to that in a real disaster. How do you simulate that in training so that you're ready to go out the door?
You know, the nice thing is that everything's done in steps. So the alert tube is initially started on the ground, and then it's moved over towards a rubble pile. And then once they are comfortable doing that, they'll move the rubble pile they'll take the tube and move it onto the rubble pile. And that starts, again, creating that chain that the dog realizes, oh, the party is not only in the tube, it's on the rubble, and that's where I need to go. And so the athleticism of these dogs is without question. They're trained to work on uneven surfaces, loud settings, rubble, ladders, pallets, depending on where the disaster is. These dogs are more than capable of meeting the challenge of whatever type of footing that they're going to be dealing with.
And I understand that the Search Dog Foundation is creating a place where we can recreate these disasters and things like that. Tell us a little bit about how that'll help in terms of bringing back lessons you've learned in the field and then using them to train not just yourselves but also future generations. Right.
Will Milda had a vision not only to create a pool of incredibly trained dogs that are capable of doing this, but also create a training center that would help facilitate not only the training of them initially, but the future training, maintenance training of these dogs, both regionally, nationally, and eventually internationally. So the Search Dog Foundation, with many, many partners, have built an incredible 125-acre site in just near here. It's the National Training Center. It's the only one of its kind that specifically is built to train search dogs. And so what they've done, and because deployments, it doesn't happen very often, so what they've done an incredibly good job of doing is taking the input of people, handlers like myself and others around the nation, bringing them together and saying, we're going to build this. What do we need to build? How does it need to look? How does it need to sound? What does it need to feel like? Not only for the handler, not only for the dog, but for the handler. They need to make it as realistic as possible. So this NTC, the National Training Center, being one of a kind, they've done an incredible job of replicating disaster sites throughout the world, whether it be a flood setting, a building collapse, mudslides. It's a site that will, for many years to come, help build, maintain, and strengthen the disaster search response in the United States.
Sounds exciting.
It's a very cool site. I am lucky enough to live very close to it. My access to it is pretty open, which is it's a big deal. Having access to it and being able to see its growth and the potential that it will have is nice.
Tell us a little bit about your deployment experience and what you guys experienced when you were on deployment, as well as what you brought back with you and how you incorporate that in the training as well.
The deployments, there's a number of deployments. There's regional deployments, those are more primarily called call-outs. And so Riley and I have been on a few regional call-outs. So working in Santa Barbara County, the first one that he and I went to was a gravel truck that had come off a very large grade, gone into some homes, destroyed some homes. Some people, unfortunately, lost their lives, but there was some question as to whether
his text just went through. We just lost the connection.
Weird. We're up. Get up. I'm not going to play with you. Cheater. Get up. Here. Get up.
So tell us a little bit about your deployments and the experiences that you brought back with you.
Sure. So these types of search dogs, I try to explain to people, they're almost like an insurance policy you don't want to ever have to use. The only time these dogs get put into use is when something very tragic has happened. So the stories are never good, but the outcomes, we try to make them as positive as possible. So Riley's first experience was Santa Barbara had a gravel truck that came off of a highway into some homes, taking the homes out. A family was killed in the process, but there was a question as to whether there was someone else inside. So Riley was brought in to help facilitate, make sure that there wasn't anyone else inside before they started moving the debris. These dogs are used regionally for events like that. There was a situation in the last year and a half where some firefighters went missing in the Ojai area. We were called in to help attempt to locate those. One of the very cool parts of my job, while I do work for Santa Barbara County Fire, is that I was asked right about the time I got Riley if I was interested in being part of the Los Angeles County Fire Department's USAR team, CATF2. The really cool component of being a part of their organization is the fact that they're one of the 2 internationally deployable teams. So themselves in Fairfax, Virginia, are used by the federal government to go out of the country should the request be made. Any time that we're taking, where we go to a deployment, whether it be local, within the United States or internationally, we bring back huge amounts of information. Riley and I responded with CATF2. That's when we go out of the country, it's USA2 to Japan following their earthquake and tsunami. We were there, I believe, in country for 8 days. We searched a number of towns there, and then most recently and most notable was that we spent the 2 teams, both Fairfax and Los Angeles County, we were gone 22 days. We were in Nepal for 18 of those days. So the takeaways are immense. Personally, professionally, Japan was incredibly different. That was my first real deployment to a major disaster setting. It was, ironically, being that it had such a major earthquake, there was no earthquake damage. We saw no earthquake damage, just massive, massive amounts of tsunami damage. We saw very little people. What we called the pile was just expansive, and you didn't see anyone. It was you were there with your team, but you saw very few people. On the other side was Nepal, where massive, massive amounts of earthquake building damage, things that I think people more readily think would happen, big buildings coming down. And the difference was the population density there is so immense. There's so many people. They didn't have any place else to go, so they were still there. And so managing your dog, managing the search sites, being aware of the search sites. In Japan, it was lots and lots of wide area. You walked and you walked and you walked because there were no roads to use. We had no vehicles that would go through any roads because there were no roads. So we walked for hours, which really spoke to the fitness of the dogs and how we train them to do those types of things, or how they're trained to do those types of things. Where in Nepal, we would get into whatever vehicles that we could get our hands on, and we would drive into sectors and look for buildings. And so two very, very different locations. The interactions were very different. The takeaways were very different, but nonetheless, they were all very, very important. And we've even since then come back to the training staff at the Search Dog Foundation, and they've picked our brains for hours to go, how can we bring that experience to the Search Dog, to the NTC? So the Japan experience will be there, and certainly Nepal.
And when you first arrive in country, for instance, or at the scene of any disaster that you've been called to, what goes through your mind knowing that you and Riley are being called there, and you're the one that a lot of folks are relying on to either find their loved one, or the firefighters are relying on you to tell them, where do we search for someone who's still missing? What goes through your mind? We train so much. The obligation of these dogs, when you first get them, is we train upwards of 6 times a month. Once they get certified, we can bring it back a little to 4 times a month, but we spend hours and hours not only training with the team, but training alone. So the nice part of it, going to these situations, and I say that when I say nice part, is that this is what we train to do. It's what we spend countless hours preparing for. So when we get to these things, we get to these situations, it's the opportunity to finally put into work all of that work that we've done. Not only our team members, I think they understand the value that the dogs bring, but the people at the location, whether it be Nepal or Japan, Florida, wherever these disasters happen, people know what these dogs are for. They attract a lot of attention. So it's a burden that we bear, but it's one that no handler would ever trade. The knowing that a lot of times it's not, we're always looking for someone who's alive, but a lot of times and that's kind of the takeaways I've taken from Japan and also from the local deployments as well as Nepal, was that a lot of times it's just families want closure. They want to know that dog or one of these dogs is going to go up onto what used to be their home, and if they come off and I turn around and say the unit, they understand they've got closure, and that's huge. That will someday one of us have the huge opportunity and the great sense of satisfaction when our dog goes up and he barks, and bring in the teams and we pull out the stuff and there's someone. Yes, that's a big deal. More often than not, it allows, what we're doing now with these dogs is allowing them to know that we're not leaving your family behind. I'm sorry, if they were here, they're no longer alive, and it allows closure. And I saw that a lot in Nepal. People would just simply say, and we would run the dogs, and that allowed them to know, okay, we can mourn our loss instead of hoping that are we leaving someone there. So it's a balance. It's a huge obligation, one that every handler takes on willingly, but because we do so much training, it's just the opportunity to put into work what we've been doing for so many months and years. That's a lot of trust to put into you and into the dog.
Right.
And tell us a little bit about the trust you have in Riley
and the bond you have with this guy.
He is He's awesome. When I first got him, I wouldn't say it was love at first sight. He has matured beautifully. He's a incredibly competent searcher. When I first got him, he was a little hectic because his energy level was so high. But he has really grown to be someone I can rely on to tell me when a pile, a building, a location is done. When I first tested him to be certified, he took me through it. I didn't know what I was seeing, but he got me through it. And it wasn't until the second certification 3 years ago where I was really comfortable in my own skin. I knew him. I knew every movement he was making. There was a number of times where I told the proctor, and I said, if he pops his head up again and does this, I'm like, we're done. He's telling me that we're done. And so the trust is huge. He knows that I'm not going to put him in a situation that is, yes, it's inherently dangerous, but I'm not going to put him in a situation where it's disastrous right off the bat. So we assess what we're doing. We put the dogs in where it's less likely for. We're not going to put in search personnel. We're not going to put him in. Unfortunately, he's a tool like anything else. If he were to get injured or killed, it's a risk that we take, but it's a lot less risk losing him than it is losing one of us. So the trust is immeasurable. He knows what I want, and I know what he's telling me, and that takes a lot of years to work out. I think when we first were paired, I likened it to a dance and a first date. It takes a while to figure out how to dance together, but if that first date isn't great, it's not going to work. And over the years, we've learned how to dance together. He's been good.
And is he with you 24/7, or is he
in a kennel? Or tell us a little bit about home life.
So a day in the life of Riley. The dogs are kenneled more often than not, and it's by design. It's a challenge sometimes to explain to people why. So the philosophy is this: all the dogs have been DNA tested to know that they've come from a wolf. And a wolf comes, they live in a den, and they go out and they hunt, they bring their kill, and they come back to their den. And so what these dogs do is that they're really tapping into that dogness, where they're in their crate, and when they come out, these dogs are coming out with some gusto. They're coming out because they're like, ooh, I'm gonna play. So they come out and they search, they find their person that we've hid, or in the situation of a deployment, potentially a victim that's trapped. They get their toy and they go back. So Riley's in his crate more often than he's not. He comes out obviously to use the bathroom. He comes out for training. He does come in the house at night. He does get what we call dog time, where he comes in. His only expectation is that he doesn't sit on the couch and he doesn't get in the trash can. So he hangs out at home, which is fine. He does wonderful with our other dog at the house. And then when it's time to go to bed, he goes right back to his crate, and that's where he spends the night. So he's in his crate more often than not. He's with me 24/7. Unless I'm going to travel someplace where I can't take him, I give him to another handler or someone who's qualified to handle a dog like this, because even with best intentions, you can really undo these dogs. They're not pets yet. They look like any other Labrador that you'd see, but they have a high level of training. We've committed thousands of hours into them, and so we give them to another qualified person to manage while we're gone. So he's with me all the time, stationed at home, in the truck, anywhere I go, he's with me.
One of our viewers is asking, does he get to go on the fire truck with you when you go out?
Yes and no. No, he doesn't go on calls with us, but he has been on the engine countless times. We take him to PR events. If we're going to go to the park and work out, he will come with us, because they do need exercise. So yes, he has been on the engine. No, he does not respond to calls with us.
Wonderful. And now you mentioned about someone hiding for Riley as part of your training, and you can't do this training by yourself. You cannot be prepared for deployment by yourself. So tell us a little bit about what's involved.
One of the challenges of maintaining these dogs is that you need a committed team to manage that. So being a part of having access to the Search Dog Foundation at the NTC, being a part of LA County's their team, is that we've got a lot of handlers, and everyone's committed to keeping these dogs as sharp as possible. So in order to get these dogs to stay sharp, we have to hide their victims. So we will bury our handler cohorts and people that we'll bring in who volunteered, and it allows the dogs to then go out and find the human scent. We can't train them without it, so we will put people into lots of terribly dirty places in order for the dogs to stay really, really sharp.
And now, what happens when Riley retires eventually? Because obviously he'll retire before you do. What will happen once his training is done?
Once he retires, he's got. I'm confident he'll pass his next certification. He's got. Once he passes that, again, we've got a 3-year window. I don't anticipate him working through that. He's already showing some signs of wearing down a little bit, but he's led an incredibly rigorous life, and just like any other dog who's 8 or human who's getting older, you start wearing down. So we become advocates for the dogs. Once they start looking for an easier way to do things, we can put them into other situations to search, maybe put a younger, more athletic dog into play. But once he retires, he's going to be a pet. And that's going to be a huge transition for both of us. He sheds like, it doesn't matter if I brush him 10 times a day, there's hair everywhere. So that's going to be a challenge because he's in the crate. A lot of times what the handlers will do is that they'll give up their dogs, they'll essentially retrain them to go find other things. Deb Tosh, the executive director of the Search Dog Foundation, trained her dog Abby, who also responded to 9/11, to find her keys. So you keep them engaged because for as many years as they've worked, they've given you tons and tons of effort. So you need to keep them engaged. You just can't shut them down and just they become a couch potato, because these dogs are not couch potatoes. So you give them other jobs, you do other things with them. But yeah, he's got a number of years before he's a pet, but we'll manage it.
Well, it sounds like you guys have a long time to go.
How many other teams do you work with
as part of either San River or LA County?
We tie in regionally with quite a number. The canine fraternity is pretty small, but that said, there's a number of task forces, the groups that will come together in the event of a disaster. So besides LA County Fire, we work with LA City Fire, Orange County Fire Authority, Chino Hills, Riverside. I've done some work with the Ventura County Sheriffs. It's a community and a fraternity that's really open, regardless of what level your dog's at, whether you're a law enforcement dog or a search dog, whether it be live scent or cadaver. It's a group of people that really strive to work together. So there's no borders. We get together. If we can train, that's what we do.
And what would you tell someone who thinks they may be interested
in becoming a handler and
wants to train up a dog like Riley? What would you tell them as they go into this or think about going into this field?
I'll tell you, my mentor that brought me into the Search Dog Foundation was a guy named Ron Weckbacher, and his advice was don't do it. And it wasn't don't do it because don't do it, but don't do it because you have to understand what you're agreeing to. It is a truly it's a 9 to 10 to 12 year commitment. The dog is with you all the time. It's not always fun. It's not always convenient. It's countless hours of successes and failures and getting it right and getting it wrong. The dogs are, I liken it to, I think you would agree, you're constantly dealing with a 4-year-old where today you were amazing and tomorrow you forgot all about today. And so it's this constant retooling of what are we doing with the dogs, how are we making them better, how can we, the missteps that we're finding. You have to, if you are looking to get into it, more often than not, it's the fire department are the general place you go. So seek out your fire departments, ask them if there's a canine component to the fire department. If you're in a large metropolitan area, there's likely a task force or a USAR task force. So there are many civilians in the USAR matrix with canines. It's not exclusive to firefighters, but it's a time commitment. I tell new prospective handlers, if you're doing it because you think it's cool, don't do it, because it's cool for about an hour and then it becomes work. It's a huge time commitment not on yourself but on your family. It impacts the guys at the station, or if you're a civilian, I guarantee it's going to impact the people you work with, because when the phone call comes and you're at your job, you better have a very supportive boss to allow you to go, hey, I got to go do some important work. So it's definitely a calling, it's a commitment, it's one I couldn't imagine doing otherwise, but it's a full-time job on top of your full-time job.
And I would imagine that's quite a commitment, not only from your coworkers, but from your family as well. Tell us a little bit about how that got integrated into...
When I was hired at Santa Barbara County Fire, we've got 16 stations, but we have a lot of real specialized things that we do. One of them was, I'm a paramedic, and so there was an opportunity to become a paramedic with the SWAT team. We also have a helicopter, or a couple of helicopters, so I could be a paramedic on the helicopter, and then all of a sudden there was this dog thing. So I went to my wife, who, God bless her, is a saint. I said, oh, look at all this stuff I can do. And she was like, I'm not real comfortable with the whole SWAT thing. The helicopter thing I can live with. The dog thing. So we basically negotiated at some point to where I wasn't going to go the SWAT thing. The helicopter I did for 7 years. At the same time, I was tasked with him. But it's not something you can do without their support. Your family is going to be impacted just like our work family is. They're one extra thing to do every day. They go with you everywhere. It's like I said, it's not always convenient. So it's the impact that our dogs have and this commitment to our careers and the dogs. It's going to trickle right down to the family, and I think by and large the families are. My wife Donna is incredibly supportive. When we deployed to Nepal, it was very, very challenging because we had just had a baby. So at the time she was 2.5 months old. When I went to Japan, it was no big deal. When I got the call to go to Nepal, it was a big deal. And so I made one call. I'd taken the call from my component in LA County. I said, I'll find out. I hung up. I called him back and said, I've got a baby, and that might be an issue. And I said, and it's always about family. He says, we know. We know. So I hung up and I called Donna, and she says, all she said was, are you going? And I said, well, that depends. And all I needed to hear was the tone of her voice. And she said, you need to go. And that was it. I didn't belabor it. I was like, okay, I'm going. It wasn't easy, but again, those are the types of impacts that these dogs have, but the support that we have, knowing that, yes, I've got a young, vibrant little girl at home, but we're going to go to some place where these families have been massively impacted by something, and we would hope that if we were in that situation, that someone would send their husband and that dog, and that we'll catch up with the baby stuff when I got back. So.
Well, we have some great photos that we can share with everybody down the road of your homecoming and when you got home to see everyone. And tell us a little bit about that, coming home after that type of deployment, knowing that type of commitment, and knowing your family that long is on the line. What was that like to come home knowing you'd done your job?
Each deployment was different. Nepal was really long. We mentally prepared to get there. We do a lot of work. And Nepal was different because we had some issues with some transportation while we were there, while we were waiting for that to work itself out. Another earthquake hit. So our families were at home thinking, you're coming home. And we thought we were coming home. And then we went back to work for another, probably about a week or so. The days kind of blurred. So it was a really long deployment. So coming home we had done a lot of really good work. Both teams had helped facilitate the removal of 2 live victims, a 15-year-old boy who'd been entombed for 5 days, and then after the second earthquake, a joint group of Fairfax and LA County rescue guys have gone out into the countryside and pulled a woman out. So the work that we did was incredible. But it's always about coming home and that ability to reconnect and bring back the lessons that we learned. It's not only for the family, there's so much pride with the family, but getting off the bus and seeing my wife and my small child was it was much needed. I was ready to go home. Yeah.
And Nepal marked, if I'm correct, the first time that you and I believe the task force had actually been part of a disaster, in the sense that that second earthquake was at least a 7.0 when you guys were there in history. What was it like to experience that, and knowing that the victims of the previous disaster you were there to search for, that's what they had gone through?
Right.
What was that like?
We were again waiting to hear we had been demobilized. We were waiting to go home, and we were just essentially waiting for the word to, okay, let's pack up and go again. And then this I think it was a 7.4 hit, and it seemed to last forever. To the point, it was interesting. I told this to my counterpart, Dennis Clark. I said, I'm nauseous, because it wasn't a real jarring movement. The ground just kind of did this, and it seemed to go on forever. But then, as quickly as that came, was the realization we're going back to work. And as quickly as we had basically said, okay, we're going to go home, it was, we're going back to work. So as quickly as we could get all of our equipment back and make sure that all of our own people were secure, we went back to work. We went back to areas that we had been to previously and some that we hadn't. Tied in with the locals, which was a big deal because there were so many people. And English, a lot of people spoke a fair amount of English, so we would tie up one of the roads that we went down in particular. I tied in, I'd bring someone up because I attracted a lot of attention with the dog. Do you speak English? Yes. Do you live here? Yes. Then walk with me. And I needed to know, was this a new collapse or an old collapse? Because we need to go down the street and figure out where we're going to put our resources. So going through it changed a lot, because now you realize, oh, okay, after a big earthquake like that, because that was not an aftershock, that was a new one. Now you're dealing with these buildings that are not well built, and they're going to have aftershocks. So you really, really need to be on top of your game and pay real close attention to yourself, your surroundings, where the dog is, where your team members are. But yeah, I hadn't experienced an earthquake of that size in years, and it's not a fun thing. Not a fun thing.
Well, at least you knew you had the resources to deal with it.
We definitely had the team available to do the work.
And how do 6 dogs went on that deployment along with LA County, and an additional 6 went with Virginia from the U.S. alone? So that's 12 dogs in total. Mm-hmm. How do you work together? How do the dog teams work together to cover that amount of ground? I mean, we're talking sometimes, in some cases, entire cities.
Right.
How do you work together to do that?
The city of Kathmandu had been sectored off. So USA 1, which is Fairfax, Virginia, and USA 2 were given a large piece of the city. Because of the immense size of what we were dealing with, we were then parceled into smaller groups. So the dogs were separated to help go into smaller components to go search. We work, because of what we do, we know all these people. We know the Fairfax handlers. We've trained with them before. We've deployed with them before. They're not foreign to us. Their dogs, while they may have certain commands that are different, they do the same thing. So if we are tasked with getting together with them, it really is just a matter of you've got a different uniform than I do, but we're the same. We work side by side with our own guys, and we know, because we train so often with our own people, we know the strengths and weaknesses of every dog. Every dog has a strength and weakness. No dog is perfect, and they're not robots. So we put every dog into a certain situation that would make the most sense for them. But working with the handlers, not only our own, but Fairfax, was the nice part of the fact that we do train so much is that we know